Ahmed Khalil drove 14 hours across empty desert to reach his new job site. When he arrived, there was no paved road, no terminal, no dock. Just sand. He was supposed to help build the most ambitious city in human history. A $500 billion metropolis on the Red Sea coast. But here is what the promotional videos never showed you. NEOM has no highway, no railway, no functioning commercial port, and no real airport. They are trying to build a city of the future in a place you cannot even reach. And the logistics nightmare is burning through billions before a single resident moves in. In this video, I will expose the infrastructure crisis hiding behind NEOM's glossy renders. I will reveal why the most basic requirement for any city has been ignored. And I will show you the data that proves you cannot build a $500 billion city in a place with no way in and no way out. This week, logistics consultants working on NEOM supply chains confirmed what construction managers have been saying privately for years. The site is fundamentally inaccessible. NEOM sits in Tabuk province in the far northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia. The nearest major city is Tabuk itself, roughly 200 kilometers away across open desert. The nearest functioning international airport is in Tabuk. The nearest commercial seaport is hundreds of kilometers to the south. There is no rail connection. There is no highway. The entire northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia is an infrastructure void, and that is where they decided to build the largest construction project in human history. Consider what Dubai had before its mega project boom began. An existing international airport handling millions of passengers, a deep water commercial port, a highway network connecting it to every major Gulf city. NEOM has none of this. It is building from absolute zero in one of the most remote locations in the Middle East. The Saudi government will tell you that NEOM Bay Airport exists, and technically it does. A small temporary facility with a single runway designed to shuttle VIP visitors and construction executives. It cannot handle commercial passenger traffic. It cannot process the cargo volumes needed for a mega project. It is a glorified landing strip in the sand. Every piece of steel, every bag of cement, every construction vehicle must be trucked in, hundreds of kilometers across roads that were built for light traffic at best. One senior logistics manager who oversaw material deliveries to NEOM for 18 months and asked to remain anonymous described the situation. The supply chain is a disaster. We were routing materials through Jeddah port, then trucking everything north for 8 to 12 hours. On roads never designed for heavy cargo, trucks break down constantly. Deliveries arrive weeks late. A concrete delivery that costs $10,000 in Riyadh costs $60,000 by the time it reaches NEOM, and half the shipments arrive damaged or incomplete. The cost multiplication is staggering. Industry estimates suggest that basic construction costs at NEOM run 4 to 6 times higher than equivalent projects in Riyadh or Jeddah. That means the $500 billion budget is actually buying the equivalent of $80 to $120 billion worth of actual construction. The rest is consumed by logistics. The port situation is equally dire. NEOM's master plan includes a major commercial port, but as of 2025, that port exists only in renders. What exists is a temporary floating dock used to offload basic supplies. It cannot handle the container ship traffic that any real city requires. A functioning city of even 300,000 residents needs a constant flow of food, fuel, medical supplies, consumer goods, and building materials. That requires deep water port infrastructure that takes 5 to 8 years to build. NEOM doesn't have 5 to 8 years. Construction was supposed to be producing livable sections by 2026. You cannot house people in a place where you cannot reliably deliver groceries. The rail situation tells the same story. Saudi Arabia's existing rail network runs between Riyadh and Dammam in the east. A high-speed line connects Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah in the west. Neither line comes anywhere close to NEOM. The Haramain high-speed railway's nearest station is in Medina, over 500 kilometers from the NEOM site. There are no approved plans for a rail extension to NEOM. No funding allocated, no construction timeline. The project that was supposed to revolutionize transportation has no way to transport anything. One infrastructure consultant who advised on Gulf transportation projects and recently left the region described the fundamental problem. Every successful planned city in history was built on top of existing infrastructure. Brasilia had roads to Sao Paulo. Astana had a functioning rail network. Even Dubai started with a port. NEOM started with nothing. NEOM is attempting something that has never been done, building a megacity from scratch in a location with literally zero existing infrastructure. Not reduced infrastructure. Zero. It defies every principle of urban logistics. The timeline reveals how the logistics crisis developed and why nobody stopped it. In 2017, NEOM was announced. The master plan included a new international airport, a deep water port, a high-speed rail connection, and a highway network, all to be completed alongside the city itself. None of it has been built. By 2019, the infrastructure components had been quietly deprioritized. The city itself consumed all budget and attention. The roads, the rail, the port were pushed to later phases. Later became never. By 2021, construction managers were raising alarms internally. Materials were taking 3 times longer to arrive than budgeted. Costs were spiraling beyond projections. Logistical bottlenecks, that is corporate speak, for we cannot get materials to the site because there are no roads to drive them on. By 2023, the 20% staff layoffs at NEOM included logistics teams that had been warning about these exact problems. The people who understood the infrastructure gap were fired. The people who approved the timeline without infrastructure remained. And by 2025, the situation has become absurd. $50 billion spent on a city you still cannot drive to on a paved highway. $50 billion spent, and you still cannot drive to NEOM on a paved highway. The consequences cascade far beyond delivery schedules. Without infrastructure, Nebraska-Ohm cannot function as a city, even if the buildings get finished. A city needs water. NEOM's water will come from desalination plants that haven't been built. The equipment for those plants must arrive by sea through a port that doesn't exist. A city needs power. NEOM's renewable energy grid requires turbines and solar panels manufactured overseas. They must arrive through that same non-existent port. A city needs food. 300,000 residents consume roughly 300 metric tons of food per Dalton Y. That requires daily truck convoys on roads that do not exist, or a functioning port, or an airport with cargo capacity. NEOM has none of these. NEOM has none of these supply lines. It is planning to house people in a place where you cannot reliably deliver water. Emergency services present another impossible challenge. The nearest major hospital is in Tabuk, 200 kilometers across desert. Without a highway, medical evacuation times are measured in hours, not minutes. One transportation engineer I spoke with asked a simple question that nobody at NEOM has publicly answered. If there is a medical emergency on the line, how does an ambulance get there? There is no highway connecting the line to any hospital. There is no helipad network along the 170-kilometer route. The answer is they haven't solved it. The answer is they haven't solved it. They are building a structure and hoping the logistics work themselves out afterward. That is not city planning. That is magical thinking. Several factors explain why this fundamental problem was ignored. First, the promotional strategy prioritized spectacle over substance. Mirrored walls and flying taxis generate excitement. Highway construction does not. Second, infrastructure requires years of environmental assessment, geological survey, and government coordination. Nobody wanted to admit that the flashy parts couldn't start until the boring parts were finished. Third, the cost of building infrastructure in this terrain is enormous. Mountain ranges, coastal cliffs, and soft sand make every kilometer exponentially expensive. The northwestern Saudi desert is among the most geologically challenging construction environments in the Middle East. Fourth, admitting the infrastructure gap would have forced an admission that the 2030 timeline was impossible from day one. Finally, every consulting firm that worked on NEOM's master plan knew infrastructure should come first. They included it in the original timeline. But when budgets tightened, infrastructure was the first thing cut. Because it doesn't photograph well. The logistics crisis isn't hidden. If you know where to look, the evidence is everywhere. Construction forums on Reddit have documented the supply chain failures for years. Engineers posting anonymously describe shipments lost in transit, equipment rusting in Jeddah warehouses waiting for transport north, specialized machinery arriving months after scheduled. LinkedIn posts from former NEOM logistics staff consistently describe the same problem. We flagged the infrastructure gap in our first week. Management said it would be addressed. It never was. Financial analysts have quantified the cost penalty. Morgan Stanley estimated that NEOM's remote location adds a 40 to 60% premium on all construction costs compared to projects in established Saudi cities. Saudi Arabia has pushed back against media coverage highlighting these logistics challenges. Official NEOM statements describe ongoing infrastructure development without providing timelines or completion targets. Infrastructure development underway. That is government speak for. We started digging, but won't tell you when we'll finish. The consequences extend beyond NEOM itself. Every dollar spent trucking materials across desert is a dollar not spent on actual construction. The construction workforce faces brutal conditions made worse by isolation. Workers at remote NEOM sites are hours from the nearest medical facility. Supply disruptions mean food and water shortages at camps. The environmental impact of thousands of heavy trucks crossing fragile desert ecosystems daily has never been assessed. Saudi Arabia's own environmental regulations require impact studies that NEOM has reportedly bypassed. Foreign investors have cited the infrastructure gap as a primary reason for declining participation. You cannot underwrite a real estate investment in a location where residents cannot receive mail. What does NEOM's leadership know that they aren't saying publicly? The internal logistics reports paint a picture far worse than any official statement has acknowledged. Finding solutions requires acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. You cannot build a city without first building the roads that lead to it. This is not a technical challenge. It is a logical prerequisite that was skipped entirely. The kingdom has announced a national rail expansion strategy. If fully funded, it could eventually connect NEOM to the existing network, but rail construction in this terrain would take a minimum of 8 to 10 years. If construction started tomorrow, the earliest possible completion date would be 2033, at best. A new international airport at NEOM is technically possible, but airports of the scale needed take 6 to 8 years to design, approve, and build. Construction has not started. Not even the environmental assessment. To be fair, Nebraska NEOM has made limited progress on a temporary road network connecting key construction sites. Some internal roads exist, graded desert tracks that serve the construction phase. But temporary construction roads are not the highway infrastructure a functioning city requires. They are band-aids on a wound that was never supposed to exist. The window for building infrastructure before residents arrive has already closed. Even under optimistic projections, Nebraska NEOM will accept residents long before any of its 4 critical infrastructure systems are complete. NEOM's leadership sold the world a vision of the most connected city on Earth. Autonomous vehicles, flying taxis, Hyperloop transit, a transportation revolution. But they forgot the part that comes before the revolution: the road, the railway, the port, the airport, the basics. Workers are dying at the site. Materials are rotting in distant warehouses. Billions are burning on logistics that should have been solved before the first foundation was poured. You were told this was the future of urban living. You were sold a city with no way to get there. Your perspective matters more than any concept render. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you want the truth about what is really happening at NEOM. And this is just the logistics. Wait until you see what the internal audit revealed about the real cost.